As MAGA Republicans have been embroiled in the scandal known as SignalGate or Whiskey Leaks, which is when the Trump administration created the biggest national security breach in modern American history by accidentally exposing an unauthorized reporter to crucial military intelligence in advance of a strike against terrorists, I thought it would be interesting to check in with CNN's very smug MAGA Republican stooge, Scott Jennings. Well, I'm glad I did, because he suffered what was probably his biggest, most emotionally charged meltdown on live TV to date, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, it's always fun to see Scott Jennings lose it or be put in his place, especially because he loves to, again, he's the smuggest MAGA stooge out there, talks like this, and he's got his pocket square, and he loves to own the libs and troll the libs, and it's funny when he either gets trolled or has a friggin' meltdown, which he did here. So brace yourselves. This is Scott Jennings at his most unhinged as he struggles to deal with the fallout of SignalGate.
I do believe the White House, and I think the president has some right to be unhappy about what happened, because he made a righteous decision, and the military carried out his orders ruthlessly, efficiently. We did what we're supposed to do here. You know, it was a good operation, and it's totally been overshadowed by this communications snafu. But I don't believe they should give a scalp here. I really don't. I don't think they should give in to the mob, because you know what? If I've learned one thing about the mob, it's never enough. If they fired Hegseth, they'd ask for Waltz. If they fired Waltz, they'd ask for Hegseth. It will not be enough, and I think they ought to weather this storm and move on.
If this had
It's a teachable
happened in
moment.
a Democratic administration, this would have been absolutely, you would have been the first person calling for quote unquote scalps. This was an enormous
I'll answer your question if you'd like, because in a Democratic administration, the Secretary of Defense went AWOL and killed 13 American soldiers, and not a single person called for him to go down.
Scott, if you'd like to make a, hold on a second, everyone stop talking. This is, I think everyone has misconstrued the title of this show. I'd like to hear what you both have to say, but our audience wants to hear from both of you separately, not on top of it. Scott, you had a point to make. You made it. Lulu.
So he is, as you can tell, he's not happy about this, because this has been, as we've discussed, rightly so, an extraordinary scandal that, quite frankly, the Democrats would be well within their rights, both politically and also substantively, to exploit. The fact of the matter is, this is the biggest national security breach in modern American history, which reveals the incompetence of the Trump administration, from their national security advisor, defense secretary, director of national intelligence, CIA director, and others. And it's very likely that at least the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA director John Ratcliffe, it's very likely that they lied under oath when they had the misfortune of having to testify before the House, or excuse me, Senate and House Intelligence Committees the day after. It was the Senate the next day, and then the House the day after that, right? And the polling on this has been disastrous for Republicans. More people in the preliminary polling think this is a bigger deal than they ever thought about the Trump classified documents case, which was a huge deal, or the Biden classified documents case, or even Hillary Clinton's email scandal, which was more of a scandal than any of those things, at least in terms of the presentation, because Republicans demagogued the hell out of it. And this has the potential to be even worse if Democrats play their cards right and the media holds both parties to the same standard. So that's why Scott is panicking here and why he's lashing out. But we'll continue.
Lulu, I invite you to respond to what you wanted to say.
Thank you. All I would like to say is that, you know, if this was a Democrat or a Democratic administration who had foolishly, unconscionably, created a group chat to have a discussion about a military operation that was top secret, I think, Scott, you would have been the first person to call for those people's resignation. Accountability is not something that is either Democrat or Republican. Accountability is actually something that normally happens in a well-functioning administration. This isn't, cowboys and Indians and calling for scalps. This is actually what most people would think was, if someone has behaved in a way that puts American lives at risk, they should be held accountable for it.
Scott, what's your response?
Laura, may I, since she addressed me, I'll answer it.
Please.
In a Democratic, you don't have to make up hypotheticals, Lulu, about if this happened in a Democratic administration. Let me take you back in time. In a Democratic administration, the Secretary of Defense oversaw a disastrous military operation in which 13 servicemen died in Afghanistan. Then, to try to make up for it, they vaporized like 7 children in a drone strike. Then later, the Secretary of Defense went AWOL and didn't even tell the commander-in-chief.
This is a completely
You don't
different
have to
thing
come
that
up
you're-
with a hypothetical.
So let's stop there because he's made some interesting points. Okay, let's think about this. The first point was, okay, well, there was the Afghanistan withdrawal. Now, you've all probably heard my spiel about this, but as a reminder, Donald Trump set the stage for the Afghanistan withdrawal because he was the one who made the deal with the Taliban in the Doha Agreement. He cut the Afghan national government out of negotiations, even though they were our nominal allies, and he made a deal directly with the terrorist group known as the Taliban. There has been Special Inspector General reports about the Afghanistan withdrawal and the collapse, and they have identified, despite mistakes made by Trump and Biden, it's not like Biden was perfect in this, but the single biggest contributing factor to the collapse of Afghanistan was Trump making that deal with the Taliban and cutting the Afghan government out, which demoralized the Afghan government, the civilians, and the military. Number one. Number two, even though that deal had conditions, Trump wanted things from the Taliban wanted things from Trump, Trump gave the Taliban everything they wanted. Everything. The Taliban did not give Trump everything Trump demanded, nor did Trump enforce those conditions. The only thing the Taliban did for Trump was not shoot U.S. personnel. All the other conditions they did not honor and Trump did not enforce, but he gave the Taliban everything they demanded of him, including Trump pressured the Afghan government to release 5,000 imprisoned Taliban fighters. So Donald Trump directly added to the Taliban's ranks by giving them 5,000 of their soldiers, their fighters back. And then he proceeded to retrograde U.S. forces, withdraw U.S. forces, leaving the demoralized Afghan government to fend for themselves after cutting them out of negotiations and increasing the Taliban's ranks. He did not take away all the equipment. Remember, that was the talking point that we heard. Biden left $8 gazillion worth of U.S. equipment in Afghanistan. Well, that was equipment either sold to the Afghan government, loaned to the Afghan government. It wasn't like our equipment. All of the major equipment that we had, Biden disassembled, took back, or rendered inoperable before he left. But Trump had a year to do that as he retrograded U.S. forces. He didn't do that. Okay? So there's something to consider too. And by the end of it, Trump left 2,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan as Afghanistan was being swept by the Taliban. And he gave the Taliban back twice that number, 5,000, to their ranks. So big fact check. He set the stage for that. He had 4 years to get us out of Afghanistan, which is something that he promised to do. And instead, he kicked the can down the road while setting up the hardest possible conditions for a successful withdrawal, a seamless withdrawal, which is probably impossible to begin with. Okay? So it is Donald Trump's fault. But I will also point out that fewer U.S. troops died under President Biden than Donald Trump. So when people like Scott Jennings say 13 service people died under Biden, if you want to blame President Biden for that, that is your right because he was the commander-in-chief, and it was a tragedy what happened to those 13 service people. But if that's your metric, that Biden sucks and Lloyd Austin suck because 13 service people died under Biden, more people died under Trump. More troops, American troops, died under Trump. So if that's the metric, then your guy is still objectively worse. And the difference is Biden did accept responsibility for the deaths of soldiers on his watch because he's commander-in-chief. Trump would never. More people died in Afghanistan. More soldiers died in Afghanistan under Donald Trump, about 40 of them, compared to President Biden. So again, by that objective metric, Trump was more incompetent and the Trump administration was morally worse. But wait, he says, well, what about civilians? Because he's right. After those 13 service people died, the Biden administration did launch a drone strike, thinking that they were killing the terrorists responsible for it, which was an ISIS-K operation. It wasn't the Taliban, it was ISIS-K that killed those 13 service people. And they did screw up, and they did kill civilians. Yep, and that's fair to criticize. Totally fair to criticize the Biden administration for that and to demand that people should have been fired. And as far as we know, there weren't any high-level officials who were fired. That's a fair criticism to make. But Scott Jennings is almost implying that civilian casualties were a result of the Biden administration, but not Trump. Except we have reports that even though Trump pledged to stop endless wars, his airstrikes in Afghanistan, same ones, increased civilian deaths by 330%. 330%. more civilian casualties under Donald Trump than under Presidents Biden and Obama. And Trump rescinded Obama-era regulations that would require the documentation of civilian deaths and the presentation of it. So it's 330% based on what we've been able to cobble together, because Trump eliminated the documentation and the requirements for those things to be documented, because he didn't want people to know how many civilians he vaporized in Afghanistan. But based on what little we do know, we know the number is objectively higher than the number of civilians who died under President Biden's watch. So then you say, okay, since he mentioned drones, I'll also point out that President Biden reduced the drone war to practical non-existence on his watch. Trump increased the drone war. So again, just this pearl clutching from Scott Jennings on this topic, he has no credibility, because by the very standards that he is imposing on President Biden and the Democrats, his party, his cult leader, was objectively worse. He has no credibility in that regard. So why are you freaking out? Why are you lashing out about this?
Didn't even tell the commander-in-chief.
This is a completely different thing that
up with a hypothetical, Lulu, because the bar apparently is very high for dismissing a Secretary of Defense.
I don't want your words to fall on ears that cannot hear you. Lulu, what's your reaction?
My reaction is, it's not the same thing. I can take you back in time and talk about the Iraq
War. You're right, because people died.
People
died in the last case and not in this case.
People make mistakes. This was using an unsecure method of discussion by the top members of this administration to discuss top secret, a top secret and very
in which case did people die?
Military
in which
I would
case
like
did people
to
die?
hear finish her point, Scott.
So here's the other thing, this idea of which people died. And then he has this smug smile there at the end. Okay, that's almost like excusing a drunk driver by saying, well, he didn't kill anybody. So a drunk driver, guy gets shit-faced, gets behind the wheel of a car, drives down the road, drives down a major thoroughfare, drives down a highway, and by the sheer grace of God, by sheer dumb cosmic luck, doesn't get anybody killed. That happens. Would we then say, it's okay. Hey, man, no harm, no foul. Fist bump, you're good, because you didn't kill anybody. They could have killed somebody. They don't get credit for the sheer dumb cosmic luck of Michael Waltz accidentally adding Jeffrey Goldberg. He didn't intend to add Jeffrey Goldberg. There was no intentionality. He got lucky in that he didn't add somebody less discreet than Jeffrey Goldberg or more nefarious than Jeffrey Goldberg, who could have sent that intelligence to our enemies or made it public for our enemies to exploit potentially. You don't get credit for that, Scott. And you wouldn't give credit if the shoe were on the other foot. If you change the name from Trump to Biden, if you change it from Republican to Democrat and give the facts exactly the same Scott Jennings here would be here saying, it doesn't matter that nobody died. People could have died, and that means heads should roll. It's exactly what he'd be saying, and he'd be right, which means we get to use that logic against him, and Democrats should be vicious and relentless and consistent, because not only is this a political vulnerability for the Republicans, as the polling has indicated, it merits the scrutiny. It merits the scrutiny. If you were ever going to demagogue the issue, the biggest national security breach in modern American history is worthy of demagoguery. It's worthy of political exploitation. It should be discussed relentlessly. And Republicans should have a microphone shoved in their face every damn time and demanded, or asked rather, to condemn it. And when they don't, because they're so afraid of Trump, they should then be asked follow-up question after follow-up question after follow-up question. And by the way, Democrats should also, if we get lucky 2 years from now to be back into power, you're damn right we should roll the clock back and investigate this. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, Scott Jennings lost his shit for no good reason other than he's worried about the vulnerability this represents politically to the Trump administration. So, in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.